Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 7. Today's guest is Dani Mercury. I'm re recording this intro because the last few times I've had, really frustrating tech issues. So I'm hoping this go round works out. In this episode, we talk about how Dani started their plant medicine journey, how they have found a portal, grandmother, and spiritual teacher in Mugwort, an emerging framework they are creating as an herbalist called Liberatory Ecology, plants and liberation work being deeply intertwined, their experiences with wetlands and love for wetlands, the magic of their home country, Mexico, being nomadic, and so much more. There is a trigger warning for this episode. At some point, we talk about white supremacy. I'm going to circle back to this later in the intro, but I just want to say there is the part of me that wants to create a gentle podcast environment that protects people or shields people from even just the word white supremacy. It's like wanting to protect a child. Experiencing and talking about white supremacy doesn't feel good. If you find that you don't feel good when coming across articles, books, or conversations about white supremacy, I can understand. It does not feel good. Even though there is this part of me, maybe out of anxiety, that wants to protect, there's also the part of me that wonders a lot about the role of protection around white supremacy, whether it's protection to soften the blow of conversations about it, or literally protecting and championing white supremacists, and just how white supremacy manages to stay alive. Because there are different mechanisms of protection around it that can show up on micro to macro levels. More on this later. But first, shout out to all the herbalists out there. I love plants. I love herbs. I love herbalists so much. Plants like rose, nettles, burdock, St. John's wort, or St. John's wort, as the petty herbalists Asia Dorsey and Karina Des Rosas would say. I've never said Karina's last name before, so I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Also, California poppy, oregano, elderberry, it goes on. They all help me tremendously throughout life. When I need to relax, when I need to sleep, when I travel, when I need to remineralize and nourish my body. Truly grateful for plants, plant medicine teachers and medicine makers, and the existence of apothecaries. Um, this is not in my little script here, but in the last recording, I was like, I love apothecaries down. Like, I love them down. And then I was just saying how I heard that from Chloe Bailey. And I wanted to include that part because I was like, yes, that's so true. I love apothecaries. Like, I just love walking in apothecaries, looking around. It's like one of the best places to be for me and farmers markets. Um, yeah, so Dani is one of these folks, an herbalist. Before I get more into the intro, here's Dani's bio. Dani Mercury, with pronouns they, them, is a queer Mexican interdisciplinary artist, herbalist, educator, and espiritista, working primarily in painting, printmaking, and altar building. They create expressive, biophilic scenes that explore themes of ancestral medicine, queer ecology, death, and decolonial embodiment. Dani is called to the work of restoring belonging with the land and nurturing ecologies of liberation. They are guided by their lineage, ancestors, and descendants as a participant in the death, transformation, and creation involved in healing from colonialism and replanting future possibilities by shaping present conditions, beliefs, and ways of being. So, first off, we experienced a few Wi-Fi glitches during the interview, and I've left them because hashtag real life. I hope you still enjoy the episode. At some point, we talk about mutable energy in astrology, and I mentioned the fixed signs, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Taurus, but I forgot to say Leos. So, sorry to the Leos out there. I love you. The other thing is that we really go on a journey. After listening to the episode, it just feels like we were walking, hiking, or driving through different kinds of terrain. And as our conversation changed, the lands and waters changed, the weather and sky changed. And then the sun started setting the closer we got to the end of the interview. And by the time we said goodbye, it was metaphorically nighttime. So we just had this amazing journey that ends with the night, stars, and the radiance of the moon. I am a bit self-conscious because I yes Danny to death, LOL, throughout our travels. You'll just hear me say yes, yes, yeah. I might have asked too many follow-up questions, which made the interview a little bit longer than I intended. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like I was kind of awkward during this episode, but such is life. I think I have to clear my throat a little bit. So this episode has me reflecting on a lot about mugwort as a grandmother plant in Danny's life and how I want to find a grandmother plant too. I thought about milky oats or nettles being one of my grandmothers. And even though I'm still deciding on who the grandmother plants are in my life, I think one of them is milky oats because how she helps me rest and sleep. I definitely feel safe or a sense of safety with milky oats. I love a good fresh milky oats tincture. I also really enjoyed and felt fed by Danny's animist worldview and how they refer to mugwort with pronouns she, her instead of the word it. Over the years, I've learned that the word it doesn't encompass how alive a plant is and the life force and spirit the plant holds. It was actually Robin Wall Kimmerer's Yes Magazine essay, Nature Needs a New Pronoun. To stop the age of extinction, let's start by ditching it, that catalyzed me into exploring the use of other pronouns like the ones she proposes, ki and kin, spelled Ki and Kin instead of it. So I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, ki, but that's what I've been saying. Let's see, something happened to my notes. Something happened to my notes. Sorry. Um, and even though I was starting to say ki and kin a lot years ago, I fell off um, and don't notice myself referring to plants with pronouns as much these days, but it's something I want to return to, especially after talking with Danny. This whole rumination on pronouns and nature really helps me understand how decolonization is a physical, embodied experience. Because when I was using kin instead of it, what I think was happening was changing the neural pathways in my mind that's so used to saying it. I found Robin Wall Kimmerer's essay in my mid-20s, something like that. Can't completely remember. So until that time, I had probably been referring to rocks, plants, clouds, etc. as it for over 2 decades, carving out and maintaining neural pathways of these linguistic habits that were just normal. What else would you call a plant if not it? That's what I was taught to say. As a Gemini moon, I find that I'm interested in how people think and make sense of the world, interested in different perspectives and ways of living life. It's stunning to see the diversity in all of this, but it can also be destabilizing unless I'm grounded in my own beliefs, values, and capacity/flexibility to interface with so many different ways of understanding the world. I'm grateful for Indigenous teachings. I don't think calling grandmother mugwort she, her is something that we solely think our way into doing as a practice in lifeway. People say it takes 30 days or 90 days to create new habits. And I think returning to this kind of language or upgrading our language is a psychosocial, spiritual, physical act. Being in a community can also inform and shape our habits as well. So it's just interesting how It's just interesting how the wonder of our bodies can be slash are sites of decolonization, liberation, joy, laughter, pleasure, etc. Returning back to the petty herbalists, Asia and Karina, I've really learned from them how imaginative, liberated worlds can come from not just our minds, but our literal physical bodies of which our mind is a part. The herbalists in my life are always talking about relationships with land too. And I love how Dani talks about cultivating belonging with the land. This is another contemplation or a big question of our time. Where do I belong? Where do we belong? Do I belong here? Do we belong here? Why didn't I belong there? Why didn't we belong? Where do I belong? Where do we belong? Speaking of land, we also talk about wetlands. I feel like I'm always tripping over my words. Speaking of land, we also talk about wetlands. But before I share more about that, other topics we talk about later in the episode include being nomadic, something I feel is changing and morphing in my own life, Dani's time in New Mexico exploring curanderismo, and then about the desert lands of Arizona and New Mexico being ancient oceans. Dani asked me about a post I made last year on my Instagram about the presence of whales in the Southwest. And instead of explaining it to you, I'm just going to read it. So let me pull it up here. I feel like I have a lisp. I feel like I low-key have a lisp. Does anyone hear a lisp? Okay, so I posted this on August 30th, 2024. Just went to post about whale bones, migratory paths, and channeling in the Southwest. In Blue Yonder, an art publication from 1981, the writer shares how they hiked up the Sandia Crest Mountains and found the fossils of sea creatures. I feel really bad because I took photos of this submission of the text and the images, but I didn't record the author, which I feel so bad about. There's this quote here. There are an excerpt that I share in my Instagram post. The desert is a place of memories, and memories are where dreams begin. Dreams are where the future begins, and the future begins in the moment. I was reminded of this as I hiked upon Sandia Crest the other day and found fossilized sea animals, beautiful crystallized bones and forms of creatures who had scuttled beneath us many dreams ago in order to lay the foundation for our being here today. They have gained their place in the sun. Thrust high above us, they have melted into the past. Only one remains. As birds flew above, following their memories, I in the middle knelt to pick up a small bone and heard far beneath, almost as if the mountains were singing, the muffled cry of the desert whale. End quote. And then I continue on saying, so interesting the presence of whales these days and before. I would have never come across this if not for meeting a local. He shared this because he asked me to tell him a story, and I told him one about Wales. What a place to Southwest. And yeah, it was just, meeting this person, coming across this publication was so unexpected. During my time in Albuquerque last summer. Yeah, and I, just to describe the images I posted, there's an image of migration paths that look like they're closer to their western Arizona, California. There's an image of either one whale, like the body of a whale. Um, well, there's, you see this whale multiple times, and I'm not sure if you're seeing the whale in different ways or if there's more than one whale. I'd love to share some more text with you. The writer also says, for millennia, whales have properly inhabited the depths of our southwestern deserts. Recently, their existence has been threatened by those who do not understand their inestimable worth. I can never say that word. The whales have created the mountains through their deep channelings, which break the wind and bring rain. They filter the waters which we plumb. Whale dung has been used as fertilizer and fuel for centuries, long before the popular discovery of whale power. They complete the water cycle by transporting lazy water from here to there, spouting it in Wyoming, gurgling it up in the springs in Utah, California, back in the spawning grounds in Jemez, etc. Then it says, see map. Their knowledge tells the birds where to go and what shapes to take. Their motion keeps the earthworms going. So yeah, I mean, and now since I've shared that, people are like, wow, whales in the desert, Dales. Did I say Dales? Whales in the desert. You know what's interesting is that like, for the most part the intros are scripted. And I feel like I'm always tripping over my words. I should get over that. I'm really about that hashtag real life. Okay. So I started researching the history of the ocean and sea creatures here in this region more. I found a lot of cool links, two of which are in the show notes, but not a lot about whales or what I thought I would have found based on this submission in Blue Yonder. So I feel a bit disappointed, but I also wonder about local knowledge and local memory about things like this. Like, maybe I won't find certain information online, and that actually there's community wide webs in New Mexico, and you just have to talk to people who live there, who have lived there for years, decades, whose generations of family have been there, whose ancestors come from those lands to learn about XYZ. Um, in episode 3, I interviewed Michaela Harrison, who communicates with whales and shares whale medicine. And right now, I'm in her whale whispering submersion gathering. The last couple of weeks have been incredible. And there are a few people in the cohort who live in New Mexico. And it blesses my heart to know that there are other people, in this, living in those landscapes, who are making the same or similar connections I am making. All right, let's move on to wetlands. I've talked about wetlands a lot over the years and have had the chance to visit different kinds of wetlands. For example, ephemeral vernal pools in a forest in Staten Island, the Graniteville wetlands, marshlands in Jamaica Bay, in Queens, a swamp, a gorgeous, luscious swamp in upstate New York, where there was skunk cabbage and high bush blueberries and moss. It was just so green. Just the color green was like nourishing to just be around that amount of green and the shades of green. It was so vibrant and full of life. I also took a boat out in the bayou of New Orleans when I visited years ago. During my time here in Arizona, I've visited a man-made wetland in Gilbert called the Riparian Preserve, which is right near a canal. And it's really cool because there's all of these different kinds of plants and birds. This spurred me into researching wetlands in the desert, and there are indeed wetlands in the desert. Um, and then years ago, not years, like maybe 3 years ago, I visited a wetland. Um, it's a it's a type of wetland called a fen, Fen, in the Alpine Mountains of Southwest Colorado, and that was really cool. I have yet to see a bog or mangroves, and I would love to, see these kinds of wetlands. So yeah, I felt drawn to these ecosystems because I couldn't believe how they were being drained and filled in. At the time when I was really deep into wetland research, when they're so beautiful. in their own ways and do so much for the earth. So I'm not as deep in the wetland research anymore, but I'm still interested in wetlands. And I can't wait for you to hear Dani's stories about spending time with wetlands. Finally, I want to circle back to the part of the episode where we talk about white supremacy. For days, I've been thinking about how to talk about it, what reflections to share with you, and if I should even include this part in the intro. By the end of my ruminations, I felt kind of exhausted. And I think that's a central function of white supremacy is that it can drain and exhaust you. What happens when we are tired or exhausted? We don't have any energy and we need to rest. White supremacy, as its spirit clearly presents itself today, wants to be the grand storyteller, perhaps the only storyteller, or the storyteller with the most power, erasing and erasing and erasing and erasing. That's what it feels like. And then starting over to tell another story. Once upon a time. One of the story medicine bombs I return to often when I need guidance around stories and storytelling is novelist Chimamanda Adichie's TEDx talk, The Danger of a Single Story. The TEDx is linked in the show notes. Although it might not seem like it or feel like it, Chimamanda's message feels like a love frequency of some kind and makes me wonder what would happen if waves of this kind of love washed over the world. I'm not going to share too much about the TEDx because I would love if you watched it, if you haven't watched it already. Yeah, and just encourage you to test out this story bomb for yourself. Speaking of stories, I'll end the intro by talking about memory. Dani talks about the ecological role of wetlands, particularly what happens when mangroves let it out and cry. When I say ecological role, I'm talking about the role, purpose, or function of a being in an ecosystem. For example, what is the ecological role of diatoms in the ocean, lions, ants, and human beings? At this time, when the new administration and whoever else out there supporting their agendas wants to wipe away memories and whitewash history, I encourage memory keepers to recognize your ecological role in our communities and societies, and not just recognize your role, but to value your role. Value yourself just as a person, a spirit, but your role as a memory keeper. I said in the other recording, I know that a lot can come with the word value, but I'm just trying to say that like we need memory keepers. It's like memory keeping is actually an integral part of life. You know, it just is. We all carry different messages, or we all carry different memories. We all carry different messages. That's true too. We all carry different memories, so this message is for everyone. I do think though for people where memory keeping is a part of their life's work, or what they feel called to do in this world, that these folks, like I said, are vital in the well-being and integrity of society, and who helps us learn from the past, which is one and the same with the present and the future. We live in a world currently controlled by storytellers who want to diminish and erase particular memories. I personally see this as an attempt to corrupt our collective memory to suit their own beliefs and agendas, and corrupting memory to gain power has happened before. Capital B, before. We are blessed to have memory keepers in our communities. We also need more memory trackers, which could be the same thing, where folks are tracking and documenting the assaults on memory, whether it's plundering a wetland to make a parking lot, the demonization of certain spiritual practices, dismantling or bombing cultural institutions, and genocide. Yes, that's right. I'm talking about the genocide in Gaza, the genocides going on around the world that I'm still learning about. Um, it's really important to say that, especially with all the censorship and fear mongering that goes on. That's around talking about the genocide of Palestinians in Gaza. Memory is utterly vast, perhaps incomprehensible. Maybe a person can hold vast amounts of memory, even if only a certain amount is consciously available. But I don't think anyone in this world has conscious access to all memory throughout all time and before time, because then you would have had to be me last year on that one Monday at 1 p.m. in the afternoon, or me in another lifetime, or that one dolphin who journeyed with that one boat 20 years ago in the Atlantic Ocean. That's why I think it's important for us to hone in on personal, familial, community, and collective memories that we want to be well versed in. So when we come together, we are individually carrying specific memories and holding collective memory, powerfully informing and teaching each other, powerfully informing and teaching each other, and helping each other remember. I might not know about the memories you're holding, but you do. And you might not know a lot about the memories I'm holding, but I do. And then we share. It's mundane, it's sacred, it's fun and playful, it's deep, it's astonishing, it's heartbreaking. I'm personally interested in remembering, but I also know that forgetting is a part of memory too. And I'm curious to learn more about forgetting, especially in a way that's not wielded to gain power over and harm. Everyone can be a memory keeper. Everyone is a storyteller. All right, listeners, if you can slash want to, please take your time listening to this episode. Make a cup of tea at home, find a cozy cafe, or listen on the go. Either way, I hope you find at least one thing in this episode that is interesting, sparks your curiosity, is helpful, or inspiring in some way. Until next time. So glad to have you here. I'd love to start off by asking, how are you doing today?
Thank you so much. I'm doing great today. I actually went for a walk in my local wetlands first thing in the morning, and I was listening to the first episode of Meet at the Through Line, so it was a beautiful opening for the day. Um, and I brought my rattle with me and was like singing a little song for the wetlands. And it was really beautiful. I love what happens with music and prayer when I'm out on the land. And that's a practice I've been trying to cultivate, is like I really want to um express my love and gratitude for the land and water through song and prayer, but grew up Catholic and don't necessarily have access to a lot of traditional land-based songs and prayers. So it's been a lot of kind of making it up as I go, and seeing what comes through when I'm out there. So it was a really beautiful morning. It was kind of perfect little ceremony preparing for this.
I love that. I love that. I love when wetlands get love through
Yes. Yes.
music and prayer, song, voice. And yeah, I never early on was taught to do that. So I
Mm,
appreciate you sharing that. Growing up religious and then, you
yeah.
know, learning a different way to be in the world, you know? Thank you for sharing that. Um, well, like we always do with every episode, we're just gonna jump right in.
Let's
and
do it.
we're definitely going to circle back to wetlands. So,
Awesome.
and I'm also going to do an intro. I forgot to say that.
Okay.
Before I press record, I'm going to do a whole intro. But
Sweet.
you are an herbalist. You're many dope things, but you're an herbalist, and I'm so curious, how did you first get into herbalism?
Yeah. I enrolled in my herbalism program, which was People's Medicine School, run by Amanda David at Rootwork Herbals in Ithaca, New York. Shout out, Amanda. I love her so much. And I would recommend that program to anybody, especially BIPOC folks. I grew up in the woodlands of Massachusetts. I moved here from Mexico City when I was around 6 years old. And it kind of felt like jumping to a completely different world. Um, and I experienced for the first time what it was like for land to speak and to feel alive. And very early on had a connection with the entities and spirits and plant animal beings of this land. And that really saved my life in college when I was very depressed about the state of the world and feeling a lot of deep spiritual hunger and ancestral hunger for meaning and purpose and a sense of what I was meant to do in this life. And around sophomore year of college, my friend was enrolled in this program and brought me as a guest to one of the classes. And that was it for me. I felt like all of my existential questions had been answered, and to see that herbalism was alive and a viable path and being kept and practiced by people, especially people that are not white, are not ascribed to dominant Western worldviews, was truly life-saving. So I applied as soon as I graduated from my undergraduate program, and that was May through October of 2022 was when I was in that intensive. And it was really beautiful. It was really beautiful. I'm very grateful for that experience. But it's definitely connected to just a childhood love of plants and the land and kind of putting together the puzzle pieces from my culture and family of origin, and seeing all the ways in which plant medicine had been practiced and transmitted to me without being explicitly called that. A lot of it happened in the kitchen, a lot of it happened with home remedies, and a lot of it also happened once I started practicing herbalism. I started hearing from my family members on both sides about people in my lineage that were plant medicine practitioners, that were healers, that were even doctors that worked with plants to heal their community. So it felt like very much coming home to my lineage and also to myself in the place where I was, which was in the Northeast in New York.
Wow, what a journey coming home to your lineage at that time in your life. And it's always so interesting to me what like shows up during childhood and then circles back when we're an
Yeah.
adult, and like how we do things that we might not, like sometimes I feel like in my family we've done ancestral practices that we didn't necessarily say, okay, we're going to do our ancestral
Mm.
practices, but we've been doing them this whole time, so it's like there's something about something in the family line or the blood memory that's there that you're just doing, and I love that through your friend. I forgot if you said best friend. Through your friend, you were, it's like you walk through this gateway into herbalism. That's dope.
Yeah, my friend Cypress. So shout out to Cypress. They're amazing. And I love what you said about those ancestral practices just being interwoven into day-to-day life. And it was kind of, it felt like my world shifted and suddenly everything was so much more alive and I could hear the plants talking and it just changed how I saw everything. And there was so much more life that I saw in my familial traditions and the things that we do, and the syncretism even of how Mexicans practice folk Catholicism. The medicine is really, really strong. Do you have like a example that you were thinking of when you said that about traditions in your family?
Um, let's see. Well, I'm not gonna get all the details right. I feel so, but I'm gonna try to articulate this in a way that hopefully makes sense. And then, later I'll Google it. Someone can Google it. But I remember growing up in church. I grew up in the
Mm,
AME Zion Church, and also my grandma used to be a pastor. My grandpa used to be a pastor. My grandma's sister is a pastor. Like, there's a lot of pastors in my family. But
wow.
yeah, and I remember growing up in the AME Zion Church in Staten Island, and it would be the night before, or it would be on New Year's. So this is more like a community church practice, I guess, but we would do something called watch night, where we would go to church at night and stay till midnight to bring in the new year. And I just always thought that watch night was something you do at church, but actually, watch night has a whole uh, history um, in the African American community that I think's tied to um, slavery. And I mean, I'm not, I'm sad that I don't know all the details, but when I found this out, I was doing a lot of research, being like, this whole time we were doing watch night, and no one ever said that this is actually a sort of ancestral tradition. So it's just,
Mm,
oh, and then another thing, maybe another example, um, is so we eat a lot of rice on my maternal line. And I'm
okay.
just like, why are we eating a lot of rice? This was years ago. Years ago. And then I my grandma and her siblings have done a lot of genealogy research. So I know a lot about my family
Okay.
because of
Wow.
their research. And
Wow.
we just learned that like so many people in my maternal line eat rice, and that we think that some of our enslaved ancestors on this line were rice growers in the South. Like, they were brought over to
Mm.
grow rice. Um, and so it's just like, you're eating rice, everybody eats rice. You make the rice a certain way, but maybe you're not necessarily thinking like, wow, the people before me did this. And maybe that's something to like, maybe that's actually a really important part of our stories. Like, if we're doing something that our ancestors have been doing that we haven't been framing as like ancestral practices,
Mm.
maybe that's a really important part to vocalize. I hope that made sense.
It makes so much sense. It makes so much sense, especially in connection with food. And actually, starting my herbalism journey helps me understand how food has been in my lineage in so many cultures the primary through line where our medicine traditions were preserved because it's like my ancestors and my grandmothers weren't out here taking tinctures necessarily or like herbal
Hmm.
capsules. They were, yeah, cooking the medicine into the meals that they were preparing for themselves and their family.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's really important to remember, that the way that people have done things in our lives, or how they're doing it, might not look a certain way, or they express a certain way, but to be able, I guess, to recognize, wow, there's all these people in your line who are plant medicine practitioners, you know
Yes.
um so I I know that asking about your herbalism journey can go in all sorts of directions, but
Yes.
um, but you last year you created a mugworm. Okay, you created a mugwort dream lab, and I'm so curious. Like, what is this mugwort dream lab, and why did you
Yeah.
create it?
Yeah. Mugwort Medicine Dream Lab was the public offering component of a 6-month residency that I was doing in Catskill, New York with Atina Foods. And it was very DIY. This is not an existing residency. It was created in partnership with the folks at Atina Foods, and it consisted of me living on their land for the season, learning the trade of fermentation, helping out with operations in the food biz, and then developing my own art, herbal medicine, grandmother medicine project. And one of the ways it came about is I actually went there to interview for a seasonal position, and one of the co-founders is from South India, and he's very spiritual. And he told me that before I arrived, he kept hearing the word grandmother and seeing the word grandmother over and over again um, when he was sitting out on the porch and hanging out with the birds. So from the jump, the theme of grandmother medicine was very present. And for me, my first kind of official plant partner was Mugwort. Part of my herbalism program was a relationship-based component in which you cultivated a relationship with a specific plant very intuitively. It was, maybe a plant that has been really present in your lineage or one that has started to show up a lot now that you're on this herbal medicine journey. And for me, that plant was mugwort. I had so many encounters with mugwort, and I'm ruled by the moon. I'm a Cancer rising, and mugwort is a lunar plant. And I also deeply identified with the marginal terrain that mugwort occupies in the ecosystem. She's not a plant that you're necessarily going to see in old growth forests. You're going to see her in disturbed places where there has been soil disturbance, where there has been intervention. For me, I frame it as, colonial intervention, as the effects of settlers being present on this land. So you're going to see her on roadsides. You're going to see her in transitional places like between the road and woodlands. You're going to see her in meadows. She also likes damp, swampy, shady places. She likes having her feet wet. Um, and she has these like amazing silvery undersides to her leaves that I just really strongly identified with because I see her as a portal plant, and as somebody that has a very strong lunar affinity and also is a 12th house sun. I often felt like I had a foot in the other worlds, like often felt more at home in the shadow, the night, the inner realm than in the external world. And working with Mugwort, forming a partnership with Mugwort has been really pivotal in just helping me integrate this reality and helping me exist in my multiplicity and helping me navigate what it is to be a visitor in the spirit, in the shadow, in the dream realm so often without forgetting to also live and work and be in relationship with the material world. So grandmother or mugwort has been such a initiator plant for me, and the opportunity to do this residency felt like a culminative project. And so the Mugwort Medicine Dream Labs were the external part of that, in which I offered 3 sessions and invited people to engage in basically whatever work I was doing with Mugwort during that astrological cycle. So we started in August, and we learned to make salves with mugwort. So I had been making infused mugwort oil, and I had also been doing limpias, like baths with mugwort bundles. So we learned to kind of do spiritual, energetic work with mugwort. And that was kind of our portal opening session in which I introduced mugwort as a grandmother plant, as a medicinal plant, as a spiritual teacher, and that kind of opened the rest of the 3 sessions. In the second session, we made cordials, which was very sweet. Um, and in the third session, we made mugwort rosary beads, which is a practice that was birthed during that residency. And one of the aspects was a principle that I've learned in my traditional Mexican folk medicine practice or curanderismo, which is this idea that a master herbalist will be able to treat any ailment with one plant. And the practitioner I learned this from, Elena Vila, for her it was rosemary. Um, for me, I wanted to explore that with mugwort because that had been my primary plant partner for the last couple of years. So I was very curious to learn and experiment and share with other people all of the different ways in which you could work with mugwort to address physical conditions, to address emotional conditions, to um, grow in your spiritual connection with the land and with your community. And also, really importantly, to engage in the work of being in revolution, of participating in our struggle towards liberation, because I see plants as really vital partners in that. So that, yeah, that's a little bit about it was a lot of things. It was kind of an open studio container. It was herbal medicine workshops. It was also just like, ceremony. It was a lot of things, and I'm still digesting it.
It sounds so rich, and as you're describing your relationship and experiences with Mugwort and the Mugwort Dream Lab, it literally sounds like a portal. And I know that you said Mugwort is a portal plant. Like just you talking, I was like, the portal is forming. Your your words are creating a portal. And like I feel like I've always been around Mugwort, walking around somewhere in Staten
Mm,
Island or somewhere in New York City, just always running into Mugwort and running into artists who who have made amazing work about with Mugwort. And I came across a Mugwort bomb in like 2020. Um
mm,
and I was using I put the balm on like where my third eye is, but I can't remember what happened to that balm. But and I also tried to work with mugwort as a dream plant, but for
mhm,
me, um, I can I my dream time for some reason I my dream time seemed like I couldn't remember my dreams, and I don't know, it didn't. I just remember my experience being like, oh wow, I didn't expect that. But I guess that's all to
mm,
say that like I was first introduced to mugwort as a dream plant. And when I
yeah.
was reading about your work with the Dream Lab, I just felt so curious because it was like you were working with mugwort kind of connected to dreams, but beyond dreams, like there's more to mugwort than the dream time, which is really important, but there's more to this grandmother plant. And I wonder, is there a particular mugwort medicine that you really like a tincture, or can you tincture it, a balm,
Yeah.
or
Yeah, yeah. I love that. Yes, totally. I mean, that's I think another reason why I associate mugwort with grandmother medicine is that she gets very overlooked. And because she's so bioregionally available and also even sometimes gets categorized as a weed or a nuisance, there's something special to me about choosing to cultivate a relationship and see what is there beyond what empire and what Western paradigms of, what lives are worthy of being here dictate. And I think there's something kind of, mischievous about grandmother medicine sometimes that likes to, be discovered, likes to be seen. Um, so yeah, I have worked with Mugwort primarily for emotional and spiritual integration. It's funny because yeah, she does have this really strong dream affinity, and that's what a lot of people work with her for. And that is one of the threads in which I approached that relationship. And something I wrote in one of my Substack posts about plants, but particularly about mugwort, is that, you know, something unexpected about cultivating a relationship is finding that the plants also have their own desires and their own agendas for working with
100.
you. And I think she very much came with that energy, and which was like, yeah, that's cute that you want to be in the dream world, but actually, what we are here to do is actualize your dreams in the real world. And I say the real world in quotations. Um, and I was like, oh, okay. So she, more than, you know, any other plant that I've been in relationship, has sat me down and put me on a track of committing to my creative practice. That is like
Wow.
the primary way in which we work together. She's like, you're gonna paint and you're gonna write and you're gonna make your prints and you're going to learn to be multiple and be interdisciplinary
Mm.
and not worry about what the rules are when it comes to being a creative person and an artist, because we're world bending. We're like making, like, we're moving between worlds, and you just have to operate like on the reality that we're creating together. That's been, so a lot of it has really interestingly been things that are related to my material life. And that's an unexpected aspect of plant medicine for me, has been like, yes, there are so many incredible ways in which they can help you heal your physical body, your emotional body. But the deepened capacity to integrate my desires and just like create the life that I want has been honestly like the biggest way in which she has continuously shown up in my life. Other than that, I love using her as a burning bundle to practice ancestral veneration during altar work sessions. That's one of the cultural ways in which Mugwort is worked with in curanderismo. There's a specific variety of Artemisia that's particular to Mexico. So she's worked ceremonially for with limpias, and also specifically to connect with those that are in the spiritual realm. So I love her for that. I love as an oil, so lovely. And I
Wow.
just a lot of the time this summer I spent just like brushing my body with mugwort bundles during baths, and I didn't have a bath. I just had like a bucket that I would shower with. And it became a really, really sweet part of my kind of personal and spiritual hygiene practice to have a fresh bundle of mugwort to dip in that bath water and just like brush brush myself down. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. Three things came up while you were speaking.
Yeah.
Ah, oh my gosh. While you share about mugwort, I just feel like such an openness in like my heart space.
Mm.
And like the sun rising, or because I know that mugwort is a lunar plant, but there's just
Yeah.
maybe the word I'm looking for is like radiance, and that the moon is radiant also,
Oh,
you know
yes.
like
Yes.
just when you see that, well, the moon in any of the moon's phases, but that full moon, woo, lights up the entire sky. And three things came up to me. First, like, I was, before we press record, we were talking about mutable energy, and I felt like what you were saying about mugwort helping you embrace your multiplicity and your various interests. And I feel like that speaks to mutable energy. I'm a Gemini moon. I like having different interests
Yes.
and doing different things. And like, I just feel like I, and I've listened to podcast episodes where, well, an astrologer in particular, Jonathan Coe,
Mm-hmm.
talks a lot about mutable energy and just celebrating and uplifting mutable energy. And it's
Mm.
like, and because sometimes I think we get those messages of like, you're doing too much, or stay in your own lane, or, choose one thing, basically be in a box. And
Yes.
I don't think mutable energy is wants to be in a box. And it's basically like, it sounds like mugwort is helping you be yourself, coming more into yourself. And that's a beautiful thing. The
Absolutely.
Yes, like, shout out to the mutable energy.
Shout out.
Yes.
Shout out
Yeah.
to all the mutable signs. I I think she again, she's just been like, do you just see how I'm everywhere? Do you see how I'm growing on the roadsides? Do you see how I'm growing on the woodland edges? Do you see how I'm growing in the city neighborhoods? Like, I don't care. What is more important than anything is that you understand yourself, that you understand all the places in which you can grow and thrive. And it doesn't matter that if you get categorized as a weed, if you get misunderstood or demonized. And, also something cool about her is that she spreads through her like underground tubers and rhizomes. So when you try to like clear mugwort from a field by just yanking her out, it's or like mowing her down, it's just gonna like encourage her to come back stronger. So there's just that stubbornness about being who you are and where you are that she has really instilled in me. And to not
That.
be concerned with like the rules and the categories. I think that has really, really helped me be interdisciplinary and embrace that as a viable path. And it's
Yes,
awesome to hear from
absolutely.
other people that are on that journey too. It's so affirming because it really feels very confusing and lonely sometimes and frustrating.
Yeah, I think I resonate with that because there are a lot of messages out there that are, telling folks you have to be this way and this is the right way to be. Um and yeah, I think it's so important to have just a clear um vision or understanding of yourself to be able to see since yourself, and
Yes. Yes.
and for our listeners, when we were talking about mutable energy, we're talking about um different different signs in astrology have different energies. So Gemini, Sagittarius, Pisces, and Virgo are immutable energies, and Scorpio, Taurus, and Aquarius are fixed energies. And so that's just a part of astrology. And if you're unfamiliar with that, that's totally fine. But I definitely encourage you to research and check that out. The second
Yes.
thing I
Thanks for
want,
clarifying that.
yeah, the second thing while you were speaking, you were taught like, I love how mugwort as a grandmother plant is encouraging you to explore your interests and and your artistic expression. And it just made me think of, like a grandmother figure that's encouraging. And like how
Yeah.
Mugwort is ruled by the moon, which is connected to moms and grandmothers. And I don't know, I'm just curious, what are your thoughts, even through a grandmother plant? We could have our human grandmothers, but we have our grandmothers that are plants. Like, what are your thoughts on grandmother energy that's encouraging, that's like, I don't know, giving nourishing, loving energy to their grandchildren?
I love that. Yeah. I I love grandmothers. I love old women. And as I've come into my 20s, I'm 25 now, it has been a constant comfort and encouragement to know that it is my destiny to be an old hag. Like that makes me so happy and I can't wait. And I think that Mugwort really brings that energy for me that like sometimes it's like a very gentle and nurturing presence, and sometimes it's like a surly old hag that refuses to be removed from her home. Uh, and both feel really encouraging for my creative practice. I think on one hand, the surliness and the stubbornness is like nobody else has to get you, but you have to get you, and that's a non-negotiable. You have to be about yourself. You have to be committed to your practice and you have to cultivate that self-understanding, and not let your the way that you see yourself, the way that who you know yourself to be, not letting that come from, anyone else. Especially
Yes.
especially not these, oppressive, extractive, harmful systems that are always going to try and tell you who you are and what you are. That's one part. So there's like a very protective, a very spiritually protective element to it. Um, and I think the other one is, yeah, that sweet energy that you feel with a grandmother, especially that you really love, that's just like, I'm always going to be here. I'm always a call away. I think when I remember starting my medicine program in New York and then coming home to Massachusetts to visit and being so emotional, realizing that Mugwort was growing everywhere where I grew up, everywhere, and especially at the entrances of all of the wetlands and the woodlands that were such a refuge for me. Growing up in the suburbs of Massachusetts, I couldn't really deal with the reality that I found myself in, and so spent basically all my time alone in the woods when I could help it. And seeing that grandmother Mugwort had just been there with me, had watched me grow up, and was especially kind of safeguarding all of those places of spiritual refuge for me, just felt like literally being embraced by my maternal and paternal grandmothers, just that comfort of knowing that there's unconditional love there, there's protection there, and there is just wisdom that is transmitted by virtue of being in proximity with them. Um, so yeah, yeah. Oh my God, I could cry talking about
That's beautiful.
her.
I just love how I'm feeling while you're speaking. I'm just having
Oh.
all of these all of these feelings in my heart. Like, thank you so much for sharing. I'm just like, they're like stars in my eyes. I'm just like
Oh. Oh
I'm
my
just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
gosh.
Um and the third thing that came to me, I recently interviewed someone named Patricia who does these gorgeous tree portraits.
Ooh.
She spends time with trees in her community, her surroundings, and other places like Joshua Tree and draws
Wow.
trees. And she recently visited Mexico, and we were giving lots of love to Mexico. And so I would love like to hear, you know, love notes from you to Mexico, about Mexico, like just wanting to give love to Mexico.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that is such a sweet question, and I love to hear all the love. Yeah. I recently gave a little guest artist talk to a group of trans kiddos that a friend invited me to, and it was very sweet. And I got to share about my culture of origin and how it's impacted my art practice. And a reflection that came out of that was how grateful I am to come from a place that is so replete with spirit and magic, that is so colorful and vibrant, and where the spirit world is very present. Like you see it in the alebrijes, you see it in shrines that are everywhere in New York City. You see it in the syncretism of how people practice Catholicism. You see it in the markets. It is just such a special place. And I think, again, cultivating a relationship with mugwort felt so much like home because it is a plant that exists in both worlds, in many worlds at once. And I think that is one of the most powerful things about my culture of origin is I just grew up with a worldview that we live in a strange and mysterious and magical world, um, in which spirits and entities and ghosts and ancestors are a part of the fabric of our reality. And I never questioned that. It just simply was, how we related to to spirituality, to our communities, to the night and the dream world. And that has been so continuously affirmed in my work with the plants and my like journeying with the wetlands and the woods here. And yes, I love the collective imagination of my people. I love what we have inherited from our ancestors and the ways in which we continuously weave magic and medicine into every aspect of day-to-day life. And I get so excited to know that people from different cultures can experience that with appreciation. And it really feels like, when people speak the way you do about it, that you understand and receive that medicine and also contribute to it by being there and reflecting on it. So I appreciate that. Thank you for that question.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, you speak about aliveness, and yeah, I just really feel, I don't know what it is, but just an aliveness, and what you just shared felt that way. Um,
Yeah, we have
Thank
a
you.
I guess a word I'd love to share that was really key is animism. We are
Animism,
a
yeah.
very animist culture, and animism just refers to life force and the belief that there's life force in everything, from animals to plants, but also food, and objects that are made by humans. Like I have this beautiful journal, with me that I got in
Wow.
Mexico. My grandmother got it for me last time I was in Mexico City, and it's made from the yamate tree. And it just, you can just feel how much life is in this object that was crafted in relationship with plants by humans. So yeah, the animism
Oh,
is
I love that.
huge.
I love that. I'm just, yeah, again, I just love how I'm feeling. Like I feel, it feels, that aliveness feels good, you know? It feels really good. I have to go to my notes because my other
Yeah.
notepad went out. This is always happening. I need to do better with this other notepad. Thank you so much for all that you've shared so far. Um, we're gonna keep going.
Okay.
Your your work involves herbal medicine and liberatory ecology. And
Yeah.
liberatory ecology is actually an emerging framework you are creating and working with. Can you share more about this framework?
Yes. Liberatory ecology as a concept, as a framework and its language was given to me by the woodlands and the wetlands that I was working on in fall of 2023 through the spring of 2024 in Lexington, Massachusetts. I was an outdoor education teacher and was working on 14 acres of woodlands that included a stream and some transitional wetlands. And I guess what underscores it has been my reflection on how the ways that colonialism has shaped our collective psyche is echoed time and time again in our relationship with the land and our conception, and even approaches to conservation and efforts to, remediate the damage of capitalism and empire on these lands. And the focal point being that separation, the loss of the practice of seeing ourselves in the land, of shaping our self-understanding in relation to the land. And liberatory ecology came about as I'm remembering I was walking on the footpath over a seasonal stream that runs down a hill in the woods into the wetlands. And it is this idea that our efforts for liberation and our movements are as strong as our relationship with the land, and that the tools and approaches and frameworks that we need to recultivate belonging, to rehabilitate places that have been deeply hurt and damaged ecologically are the same as the work of repair that needs to happen culturally, socially, and psychically in our human-made world. And a really strong analogy for me is the work of remediating places that have been overrun by plants that are categorized as invasive. So there was one day that I'm working with my mom to create a native pollinator garden in our small yard. And there's a lot of plants that have taken root there that make that a difficult task. One of them being false lily of the valley, which is a plant that I grew up around. And there was a morning where I was working on clearing some of that, a patch of false lily of the valley. And it is very difficult to actually clear a patch by pulling them up one by one, even though they come up as these like little plants with a leaf. And as I was doing that work, I kind of instinctively moved from plucking them up one by one to reaching underneath and getting a hold of like the roots underneath the roots and pulling up a whole patch of them. And when I switched to doing that tactic, everything came up together and I saw how deeply intertwined all of these roots were of these singular plants to create an entire system. And to me, that felt like a really strong analogy for the work of decolonizing, right? It's like addressing issues and causes and problems with the approach of doing one thing at a time is ultimately not seeing how it's all entangled at the root. And that is to me really akin to the definition for what it is to be radical, is to get to the root of things. And Liberatory ecology basically just reflects how the land has taught me personally time and time again that work happens through relationship with plants, through relationship with our local ecosystems, and that we need to tend to our internal and collective ecologies in order to really have a chance at a future and at
Right?
successful liberation movements. Yeah.
Wow. Feel like I'm processing that. I was envisioning that in my mind's eye of you lifting up those entangled roots. Um, yeah, and yeah, just thinking about that entanglement and how
Yeah.
most, if not all of us are so deeply entangled in these systems.
Yeah.
And part of me is just sort of like looking at this patch of entangled roots, like, wow, because I it's like some of those roots can like be so entangled, it's like hard to get them apart. They're like
Yes.
merging into each other. They're
Yes.
becoming one another, and you're like, okay, here's this root. Oh, there's that root. And yeah, that's such a great analogy.
Yes, they all came up together. And I remember pulling that up and just having this moment of the roots telling me like this is white supremacy. This is how it takes form in our way of organizing the world and in our way of seeing the world and in our psyches. And I think that is one of the primary entry points, again, going back to Margaret, of how plants and liberation work are deeply intertwined. That healing, that necessary healing, that necessary repair in your psyche that needs to happen is not for the purpose of, self-actualizing. It is for the purpose of being present for yourself and for your communities and for your ancestors and descendants um and remaking the world.
I love how you're saying how plants are like vital and necessary for collective well-being and liberation. I believe that like to the core of my
Mm,
heart, to the core of my soul. Like and it's incredible. It's incredible that we have friends, we have kin, we have allies in plants, and that we're, as human beings, a part of the web of life. We're not alone in
yes.
kind of figuring out what's going on and working towards repair. And I also wanted to say that I think, especially during these times, that it is important to name what's going on. And I feel like sometimes people struggle with the term white supremacy because of however it activates people, or however charged it is, or if people feel that it's a tool of shame. But I think that it's
Mm,
important to name that that's literally what we're seeing and experiencing right now, at least in the US, which has ripple effects throughout the world. And it's so interesting that, people have been saying that we've been living under white supremacy for such a long time. And someone
mm,
might roll their eyes or say that that is woke, but then you see what is literally going on right now.
yes.
And so I think that I just, I don't really know what I'm trying to say, or maybe I'm having a hard time finding the words, but I just feel like it's important to name what's going on, and that could make people feel uncomfortable for whatever reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And it's really true. I think people get very jumpy or have a reflex of defensiveness when that gets brought up. But I think it's really important to be grounded in the fact that, oh my gosh, sorry, excuse me, to be grounded in the fact that addressing white supremacy, finding where it has taken root in us, in our communities, in the way that we think about ourselves and each other, the way that we approach relationships, that is soil remediation work. Because white supremacy and empire are a process of collective soul loss. And
Mm.
in order to thrive, in order to be here in a good way, you can't grow a garden, you can't grow nutritious food in soil that has been depleted of its nutrients and abused. So we need to treat the soil that we're trying to exist on and grow on, and yeah, unfortunately our collective our collective soil is so polluted, so abused, so entangled with white supremacy. But that work is for everybody, and liberatory ecology is about doing that work within your internal ecologies, finding where white supremacy has taken root in you. Um, and integrating that through a relationship with the land, seeing how it has taken root in your neighborhood, in your local ecosystems, and being able to apply that to your relationships and the way that you show up in your community.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's just like it's a lot to reflect on, and I'm hoping that anyone who's listening to this, um, I invite you to take some time to feel what you're feeling in your body, take some breaths and sit with what we just shared, and maybe go out on the land where you are, wherever you're at. You're in the city, you're somewhere rural, you're in the suburbs, wherever you're at, just take some time to like be with what Dani just shared, what we just talked about, um, and just feel how you're feeling about that.
Mm.
Um, and speaking of land, I know we we just talked about something really heavy, and I'm like, speaking of land, we're gonna let's talk about wetlands. Let's talk about wetlands
Wetlands!
more. Yeah, woo
Oh!
woo. I I love wetlands. I love that you love wetlands. So you visited mangroves for the first time last winter, and I'd love
Yeah.
to know more about that. Like, where did where did you go, and what do you remember about the mangroves?
It was beautiful. So I went to Puerto Rico, Borican lands, with a group of students through my job last year in late January, early February. And we were visiting a sibling sister school there, those Montessori schools. And one of the days we ended up visiting Gopi, which is a organization in the communities of Piñones and Loiza, which are historically Afro-Caribbean communities in Boriken. And we got to learn about how these communities have taken the task of doing mangrove restoration into their hands, specifically after Hurricane Maria did a lot of damage in their area. And also, Gopi does really amazing culture work in their communities. They teach bomba classes, they have artwork by community members, and they also are keepers of the local histories, including a historic battle that was fought in 1797 by the militia, the community militia of Piñones and Loiza against the British naval invasion. And this was won in large part through their deep relationship with the mangroves and their affinity for being able to navigate that complex terrain that allowed them to employ guerrilla tactics and win against, at that time, the largest military apparatus in the world, which was the British Navy with, machetes and flaming arrows and torches. It was really amazing to
Wow.
hear about that and how that land is being tended to by people that are descended from those ancestors. So it was amazing to hear about how deeply intertwined the mangroves are with that history of self-determination, of autonomy, of self-liberation. These were all people that had liberated themselves from captivity, from enslavement in Boriquen. That was a colony at the time and still is. And so kind of getting that primer before even meeting the mangroves was really powerful. And then something that is just like burned into my soul that in like a good way was learning about how mangroves are so incredibly potent at purifying the water where they live, at detoxifying their ecosystems, and how they act as nurseries for a lot of um, animal species that live in those areas. But something that made me so emotional was learning about how, I believe it was black mangroves. One of the ways in which they will desalinate the water or, secrete toxins is by crying salt out through ducts on their leaves.
Oh my
And
gosh.
you could actually kind of brush the leaves of the black mangrove and taste salt on it. And there was something so, oh, I could just cry thinking about it, so tender about, a plant whose role in the ecosystem, or one of their roles, is to process toxins, process, um, just all of the things that the environment needs to cycle out, that there is like beings and plants that have that specific role, and that's kind of the role that I see wetlands having overall. I see them as really akin to like the liver, the kidneys, in that really vital ecosystem role of purifying water, of cleansing water. And there was something so emotional and spiritual about meeting the mangroves, and really witnessing that ecological role that they provide, that is so nurturing, and also literally offering their bodies to detoxify the water. Yeah, so grateful for them. I think about them so much. I really hope to return and be in the presence of mangroves again soon, because I feel like there was so much to learn from them, and this encounter was so brief, literally like 2 hours, but it was so
Mhm.
transformative. Yeah.
Wow. I can't wait to go back and listen to this part. Um, because I have not um been in the presence of mangroves yet, but just
Mm.
now I felt like I was in the presence of these black mangroves. And it's like, oh yeah, plants and trees and ecosystems have stories, stories and histories.
Hmm.
And that was such a great reminder um, when you shared that primer. And yeah, I'm like, what it must be like to kind of cycle out, clear out all the toxins and
Yeah.
gunk and all the things that need to be processed and cycle it out so that the the place, the landscape, the ecosystem, all the life and the cycles of life and death in that place can just um, you know, have new experiences or
Yeah.
be renewed, and it's like, what if there were no mangroves or wetlands, it I I it makes you think of your own body, and like, what if there is no
Yes.
cycling out
Yes.
that
Yeah, we
I
get sick.
yes,
We
you
get
get sick.
sick. And something, back to our discussion about white supremacy, like right now in Borican, people are facing the constant threat of displacement and ecological disruption by settlers that want to clear these lands, that particularly want to clear lands that are in proximity to the ocean to build luxury real estate and vacation homes. And it really is so damaging on so many levels, and wetlands, like land is an integral part of culture. Like the cultural destruction, displacement that happens goes so far beyond human culture. Um, and to lose an entire ecosystem in a culture that is dedicated to life so deeply is just devastating to think about. So yeah, that's that's why liberatory ecology.
Yeah, shout out to Liberatory Ecology. And I love, like I said, your love for wetlands, because a few years ago I was researching wetlands in New York City, and overall
Mm,
just learning how like wetlands have been disappearing in the city and the country overall. I'm sure that's changing now with like World Wetlands Day and raising awareness about wetlands and people tending to wetlands. But at that time when I was researching it, I just felt like, well, also in Staten Island, there was this like community battle to save some local wetlands that were going to be
mm,
destroyed for a big box store, and I'm pretty sure that project is still going to go through. um Shout out to all the community members, activists, all the folks trying to save that wetland. But then I was also in Jamaica Bay in Queens, exploring the wetlands there, and they're protected, I think, because they're in
mm.
some sort of national park. And it was just so interesting to see like the lives and trajectories of these wetlands. And it's so interesting how wetlands can be so devalued, and like they're
Yes.
they're just something to get easily rid of, like trees. Just get rid of it, fill it in, pave it over. But they're so beautiful, so helpful, mystical. Like, there's all different types of wetlands, and mangroves for sure are so magical, you know?
Yes. Yes.
Um,
I so going to Massachusetts. Oh, did I skip out for a second there?
oh yeah, you skipped out. That's right.
Okay. Yeah, I really resonate with that. So I grew up, I come from Mexico City. I spent my early childhood there and before moving here, and basically all of my lived time and then moved to Ithaca, New York for college. I've spent my entire life in places that are filled in and blocked up wetlands. Um, and one of the questions that is always on my heart is where is all that water gonna go? Because it still comes, and I think we saw um some evidence of that last year in New York City with the flooding that was going on. Yeah, it is of like immense concern to me that they are threatened and disappearing environments. So I was just looking up World Wetlands Day too. It was February 2025 this year.
Oh,
But yeah, thank you for bringing that to my attention again. It's encouraging. It's heartening to know that there's so many like efforts at the communal and like international level to protect wetlands because there really is no future, no life for us without them.
yes, exactly. Exactly. Um, so I think you already answered this a little bit, but you said
Sure.
you grew up around swamplands. And
Yeah.
that's, the swamp is another wetland that, is always kind of looked down on. It's like
Yeah.
it's always looked down on, but I would love to know about swamplands from your perspective as someone who grew up around swamplands.
Yeah, but the closest water system to me is very small Fort Pond Brook in Massachusetts, and I grew up spending a lot of time in the Grassy Pond Conservation Area. I always found a lot of peace and relief in wetlands because I liked places that were maybe not necessarily habitable to humans. I was very curious. And that's not to say there's actually like so many humans and communities that have found belonging and home in wetlands. But where I came from, it was a place that belonged to the plants and the birds and the water and the mud, and that was very intriguing to me. It felt like there was so much magic, and one of the practices that I maintain today that I loved doing is just walking very slowly in the wetlands and especially around sunrise or sunset and hearing the chorus of birds that that hang out there, the orioles, the chickadees, the geese during the spring and summer seasons. I love how the wetlands sing. I love the spring peepers. Um, that come out in March, between March and May. It is just, again, takes me to that place that just feels replete with spirits. And I am very also intrigued by kind of the darkness of the soils there and how they make reflections so clear. It feels like such a portal. It feels like such a clear mirror. There's so much about the wetlands. They also, are home to some amazing medicinal plants. One of the ones I'm really interested is actually skunk cabbage, which is toxic if you don't know how to prepare it, but has actually been historically used by a lot of Native American and African American communities in their traditions to treat respiratory illnesses, which as an asthmatic, I'm always interested um, in the respiratory ally plants, and I'm very interested in toxic plants, carnivorous plants, plants that kind of deal with death. They feel like very 12th house plants to me, very 12th house, 8th house plants. I love them. They're such amazing teachers. And again, I think very unapologetic about their ecological role. And they're so special. So yeah, there's so much magic in the wetlands. I love them.
Yes. Yes, that's all I want to say. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, that's great. Um, I have a few more questions. Like
Yes.
one, two, three. Yeah, just like four more questions. Okay, so, ah, so good. So you and I are both nomadic in one form or another.
Yeah.
And I'm so curious to hear like what is it like being nomadic for you, cultivating your art and herbal medicine practice on the road and navigating life transitions.
Yeah. I really appreciate that about I really appreciate having that commonality, and I think it's been one of the points that we've connected around, and it's always just really cool to see your reports and what you share on Instagram and Substack about your travels because I really, really resonate with that life. So yeah, being nomadic, I mean, for me, it's just necessary. Um, it's necessary. I really see myself in nomadic animals, especially geese that actually like do travel between my home of origin and my current homelands in the Northeast. Again, like just the land and nature constantly showing us that being interdisciplinary, being multiple, being nomadic and migratory is a way of life, is ancestrally encoded in a lot of us. Um, and this year, being nomadic has looked like tending to relationships. So it's been um, spending the season in upstate New York, tending to the land and cultivating that working relationship with my residency hosts. After that, I went to Mexico for a month and was on grandma caretaking shift, which was very beautiful and challenging and emotional. But yes, I spent some time caring for my 86-year-old grandma who is needing more and more support these days. After that, I was in Los Angeles with some friends that I met in upstate and that I also met in New Mexico. Um, so lots of relationship tending. I love knowing and keeping loving relationships in all sorts of different places. I think that is one of the greatest gifts of community is having a home um, and many couches and many spare rooms and and hallways even. Um, and oh yes, I also visited a friend in Utah that I met in New Mexico. It's been a lot of kind of following my heart, but also following where my people are. And it's a practice that I hope to keep seasonally. I loved being able to do that in the fall to winter transition. And it helps me be present where I am. I get antsy when I spend too much time somewhere. I need that input of being in a new place. And I in sidereal astrology, I'm actually a triple Mercury, and Mercury
Wow.
rules short-term travel. Yeah, I'm Gemini, Virgo, Gemini. And so it's kind of just I just need it. That is what
Mhm.
feeds my internal ecology. That is what feeds my relational ecologies. And it helps me practice my art because the movement the movement helps me come to the canvas. It helps me come to my journals. It helps me come to like my collage and drawing practice. Yeah, so I need that input of new environments, of learning to like navigate a new neighborhood, of greeting new plants, to be able to to externalize everything that's going on inside.
Totally. I mean, I really needed to hear that because I've always tried to understand my experience as being nomadic
Mm,
and like that it's okay to be nomadic, you know? It's okay to want to move around and it's okay and doable to have relationships in different places and it's maybe it's a matter of like you're saying tending to relationships which just like if you're rooted in one place is
yeah,
dynamic and could be challenging it's you know the only other the differing factor is that you're moving around and I don't know, I feel like I want to interview more people who are nomadic.
I love that. Yeah. I just want to say like again, I just want to express my gratitude to you for sharing that experience. And it's been I have learned so much from you being willing and being vulnerable and sharing your journey. And I want to really uplift the fact that you hold such an important ecological role. And this is like also a community role that has been present in so many of our
Oh, thank
ancestral
you.
cultures for a long time. And it's people that those are people that bring stories and news and memories and teachings from other places that the people that they're visiting need to hear. And I really see your movement as akin to water that needs to like that
Oh,
visits
thank you.
so many terrains and shapes it, you know, like it starts in the mountains and goes
Appreciate
through
that.
like the desert and the canyon lands and ends in like really fertile um you know, ocean, wetlands, territories like that feels very elementally aligned for me based on
Uh,
what I know about you.
Oh my gosh, thank you. That was such a beautiful reflection mirroring that I really needed to hear. Because I just feel like it's it's like a exhale when you hear like it's okay to be nomadic. And there's other people who are being nomadic, you know?
Yeah.
Thank you. I for reflecting that because I do feel like that. I'm in New York City. Oh wait, now I'm flowing to Maryland.
Yeah.
Now I'm in Arizona. You know, but being nomadic, what a interesting, it takes you on interesting paths and roads, adventures, and it's an interesting life, you know?
It
I,
really is.
I'm all about hearing stories from nomadic people. And another thing, you're a poke tattoo artist. That's dope.
Oh yeah.
So do you tap people while you're on the road?
I do. I do. That is
That's
actually
dope.
one of the ways in which I sustain myself when I am not working a seasonal or full-time job. And that's been such a gift. I had the like beautiful opportunity to give one of my friends in LA their first tattoo. We did a guava plant and made a whole ceremony. And like the I was I let me just say, I have been known to be a little bit reckless maybe. Not reckless. I have been known to stress my family, specifically my parents out with the way I move sometimes. Um Doing that tattoo gave me money to eat for the rest of my travels. Like that's kind of what it was.
Yes.
And that's how it
Absolutely.
was.
Yeah.
Um that exchange was really amazing. And I learned so much from going through that process with that friend. They're so special and so dear to me. And yeah, that's I think one of the many important tools to have, tricks and tools to have in your tool bag if you're nomadic, is you have to have a lot of different skills that make the world a hospitable place. So, having the kitchen magic, the herbal medicine, the water work, just knowing how to be at home in a lot of different places, I think is a really important skill that, is applicable when you're nomadic, but also when you do decide to root down somewhere for a while. So yeah, the tattooing has been such a beautiful form of relationship building, and I'm so grateful when people trust me with putting art on their body, especially when it's in connection to plants. So doing the botanical tattoos is a big love of mine.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, if anyone's ever interested in any poke tattoos and you're in your
Yes.
area,
Yes, if anyone's listening, I will be in the New York City in Brooklyn from May to October this season 2025. So hit me up for a tattoo. My Instagram is Mercury moves me. Yes.
word. And we'll put all this in the show notes. If I was in the city, I would get a poke tattoo. But hey, whenever we cross paths, I would love to get a poke tattoo. I'm so serious.
I would love that. That's one of the one of the best parts of this is I have like standing appointments with people. I have standing appointments with people in Mexico and like Portland, and it's just like, all right, we got to get you out here so we can do this. So, yes, it's
I
honestly
love it.
a great reason to travel.
Yes, it's happening. I'm claiming it now. Somewhere in the
That'd be
future,
so cool.
that poke tattoo is happening. Um, yeah, I mean, I have some poke tattoos. Um, but because I was gonna say some people have amazing tattoos. Like some people
Hmm.
take a year to like dream up their tattoo, and it's like I think
Yeah.
I wanna, I wanna, do that. I want to be more intentional and thoughtful with my tattoos. So, anyway, just thought I'd share that.
I love that. I like doing collaborative designs with visual artists. Like that is just so special. So ooh, okay, we should put a pin in that one. We'll, we'll chat more about that.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Um, I'm just processing, you know, processing, appreciating, um, and thinking about someone who I saw recently. This is kind of random, kind of a tangent, but
Uh-huh.
they had like a monarch butterfly on the top of their,
Oh,
I don't know what you call this, on the top of your hand, on the top of their hand. And I thought
okay.
that it was so cool.
That's gorgeous. Wow.
Feel like I'm tripping over my words a little bit, but anyway, I just feel like tattoos are really cosmic. Like I see some people's
Yeah.
tattoos. I mean, they're cosmic and they're practical and they have stories and you could feel the energy in someone's tattoo and I don't know, it's dope. Um
Oh,
okay, that was such a tangent. Um okay, let's keep going. So I know you have visited New Mexico,
yeah.
where I have been living for a few months, and I'm curious, how was your time here? Did you come here for a like an herbalism offering?
I was in Albuquerque for 2 weeks this past summer for a curanderismo intensive. There's a Curanderismo Summer Institute that's run out of UNM in Albuquerque. And I had been wanting to go for 3 years. And when I quit my job, I was like, this is my gift to myself for being brave. So it was amazing. It was honestly really life-changing. I feel like I was not all prepared for everything that it was going to be. I thought it was going to be kind of more um classroom learning because it was at a university, but um, there was intense ceremony involved in what we were doing, and it really felt like, you know, a a phase of initiation, although that is not, how that ancestral medicine is typically passed down. Like you know, it's not traditionally done through an institution. And there is a lot of thoughts and feelings that I have about that happening through an institution because this program actually started out very community based and it actually, started out as community members in that area bringing maestros from Mexico, from also that were I think practicing in the region to teach classes and has since become institutionalized. So I'm really grateful for more than anything the people that it brings there, the gathering um, that happened there. I was able to make connections with some incredible practitioners from all different disciplines, herbalists, birth workers, death workers, massage workers, acupuncturists, chefs, teachers that were there to engage in traditional medicine and curanderismo. So it was amazing. I loved the desert. I am hoping to go back again this year, and now have a really, really sweet cohort of other queer Mexican and indigenous folks that are on that journey of learning curanderismo, connecting to our traditional medicine. So, so grateful. Love New Mexico. Also, was crazy to experience like more affordable food. Like I went to a cafe and got a burrito with an egg on it for $4, and I was so mad when I got back to New York and was paying exorbitant prices for a meal.
That's why I like Albuquerque because Albuquerque is so much more affordable than the Phoenix metro area. Because
Yeah.
literally, me taking a lift from Phoenix to Gilbert, where my grandma lives, is like $30 to $50 one way. But in
That's
Albuquerque,
crazy.
it's like $8 to go one way.
Yeah. it was honestly, I was like, oh dang. I I'm thinking I'm always like looking at next steps, but I am thinking about having a period in New Mexico because there's so much medicine. There's so much more access to learning, my specific lineage of traditional medicine, and also I loved the desert plants. I really want to connect with them more. And yeah, the affordability. I was like, "Oh, this really is a huge impact on quality of life."
Yes. I hope you do. It's I have no words for New Mexico. I have no words, but I know that I really love it here. Um, but yeah, let's talk more about you coming to New Mexico like later, because I'd
Yes.
love to support you in coming
Oh, thank
here,
you. Thank
you
you. And
know.
I'd love to hear more from you about the places that are special there. I remember reading a post that you shared about the whale carcasses that were found in the desert in New Mexico, and that being so impactful to how I yeah, just related to the land there. So yeah, so much New Mexico love. Shout out.
Yes, because it being like a ancient ocean here, and that post was about how I visited this elderly artist last summer when I was staying with some folks in Albuquerque, and he shared this 80s art publication where someone was writing about the whale migration paths in the Southwest, and people have found, um, you know, fossils, oceanic fossils. I'm not sure completely if, what kind of fossils, but that, the the history, the memory here of the ocean that once was here. And
Mm.
who knew that in 2024, I don't know, who knew that, like, people, okay, what am I trying to say? Today, I've been tripping over my words so much, but just the fact that there's knowledge out there of the whale migration paths in this region is so interesting.
So
Um,
interesting.
it
Do you
it
remember
is.
the publication was called in case people are curious?
I can't remember, but I'll put it in
I
the
Yeah, I'm like seeing your
show
Instagram
notes.
post in my mind. I just remember it visually, but I forget the title.
Yeah, I forget the title. I gotta look it up. I'm mad I can't remember, but and the only reason why he showed me that publication is because I met him, and within like 5 minutes of meeting him, 5, 10 minutes, he was like, "Tell me a story." And I said, "Oh, okay." So
Oh
I told
wow.
Yeah, I'm like, that's an interesting way to start a conversation. And I told him how last summer I had a chance to work on a boat. It was my first time going out to sea, and I saw whales, pilot whales, and I also
Oh,
got to hear them on the hydrophone, which is, you put a hydrophone on the side of the boat and it goes in the water and it picks up the voices of the whales.
wow.
And I was like, "Oh my gosh," and I was telling him this whole story, and that's the only reason he brought out this publication to show me, "Oh, whales have been in these lands also." And I was like,
Wow. Oh my
"Very
goodness.
interesting." So,
Wow. That's
thank
that synchronicity is so powerful.
thank you for
Uh,
asking. I would have had no clue, no idea, because honestly, people have been telling me, "Oh, well, the desert used to be an ocean," and I've been so skeptical. But I guess there was an old ocean here.
yeah.
And so,
That feels, I was thinking about that when I was in Utah because I was just astounded by the red rock formations and arches that my friends took me to. And I was thinking about that this morning on my walk through the wetlands in terms of just of like legacy and what what is like left behind by like ancestors and also entire worlds that don't exist anymore in the form that
mhm.
they once did. Um And I'm really, really fascinated by that. I think I like often think about what kind of worlds we're leaving behind, what kind of ancestors we're gonna be. And yeah, those desert oceans really make me reflect on legacy, and
Mm.
on the importance of especially being in red rocks, just like the way that water unquestioningly takes the path of least resistance, and in doing that makes these incredible canyon and arch formations. It reminds me of something that my friend told me once, because I often get in my head about um, my I use career in quotation marks because I don't even believe in that, but my art career and like um just the life that I'm trying to build. She always reminds me about how much time it takes to form canyons and how it really happens one drop of water, one trickle at a time. And it's important to maintain your path, to focus on your path. And I'm just fascinated by that, by how and I wonder if like the water in the ancient oceans could feel the canyons that it was forming. Yeah, it's I just so I love everything you've shared about ancient desert oceans, and I'm so curious to return and learn and spend more time there because it feels really, really intriguing.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, and I look forward to following your journey, whenever you get here. Um, yes, New Mexico is just gorgeous, gorgeous, magical place. Um, I have two more questions, so
Okay,
we're
how are you
one
doing? How's
down.
okay? You're feeling
I'm
good?
just I'm feeling good. I'm nervous about the Wi-Fi. Um,
Oh, okay.
yeah, I'm nervous that I like I like doing the interviews early in the morning when the Wi-Fi seems to work better. So
Okay. Okay.
I'm just worried. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we spent so much time talking.
I know it's gone by. Okay, two more questions. It's because
Yes.
I asked follow-up questions, maybe too many follow-up questions, but okay. So when we connected
Yeah.
over email about the interview, we shared with each other our experiences with grief. And I'm
Mm,
curious, as an herbalist, just as a person, how are you experiencing grief right now? And feel free to share whatever you want to share.
yeah. Oh, there's so much to say about grief. I think growing up in Mexico, I had a lot of behavioral issues. Um, that later in life, I think I was able to recognize as sensitivity to unresolved grief and other issues in my family that I internalized. And I think I've just always grown up holding on to this just this colonial grief, this grief over the possibilities and the worlds and ways of life that were destroyed and taken from us through conquest. The possibilities for relating to each other that were taken through conquest and, replaced with dynamics of domination and power, and asserting um, the churches or the colonial governments will onto our children, and just, instead of like practicing loving, nurturing relationships, there's always been that grief. And then moving here, I had a really I think at times confusing and maybe distressing experience of, when the land began to talk to me, I would often feel deeply afflicted with these spells of grief, like literally falling down to the ground, crying in pain over this grief that felt like it wasn't even mine. Like it felt like it was coming from the trees and the stone walls and the paths over what had been done to them and like on this land to their people. Um, and so I think I have always shared a lot of, I think I've always felt like um a, a a mangrove plant in the way that a lot of grief gets metabolized in my body and in my heart that doesn't even necessarily belong to me or is not even necessarily grief that I experienced. And I think it's taken a lot of work to comprehend and discern where it comes from and what um what is getting processed so that I, one, don't over-identify with it and don't just like succumb because I have like it just can take me to places that are really hard to come back from and really hard to like take care of myself from and really hard to just be in this world from. But also to, yeah, understand like um how to interface with the grief that I maybe am feeling for my grandparents, for my great grandparents, for my ancestors in how they have been displaced, how they have hurt each other, um, how the things that they have been through are present in my family relationships and in my body and how I relate to myself and others. So I think I have often really related, I think I relate to wetlands and mangroves a lot because I think I have often felt like that is one of my ecological roles in my family is to feel and process and cry out all that grief that we have not been allowed to feel and process. So for a long time, I think I just couldn't handle it. I think had succumbed so completely to it that I just like became a shell and was not functional and experienced a lot of soul loss and identity loss because I felt so entirely and solely responsible for like being the grief tender in my lineage and yeah, the plants and the wetlands and also sharing that with my family and with my friends has really helped me feel less alone in that and has helped me perform that function without incapacitating myself. So
Yes.
yeah, it's something that is constant and it's also something that I've had to learn to cultivate a lot of balance with because I think I used to be very self-sacrificial about it and I used to like almost position myself as like a martyr to this grief and this pain in my lineage and just like was like this
Mhm.
is my my place to give myself over to this and just like destroy myself and feeling this grief when actually I think it has come to teach me to access love and intimacy and interdependence in a way that the grief can be shared and be metabolized, not just by me alone. Yeah.
Wow. Ah, hmm. Yes. Yeah. Just taking in what you're sharing and just wanting to say thank you and honoring that you just shared this. Um, I feel like I just want to honor what you shared by just listening. You know,
Thank you.
I'm not sure I resonated with so much that you shared, but there's something inside of me that's like just honor by listening,
Mm, thank you.
and letting what you share have space to be heard and to like reverberate out. Um, but just very grateful because I feel like I resonate with a lot that you said, and I'm sure other folks, people who are listening right now. And yeah, it's so interesting to hear other people's grief experiences, but I want to just let let your words exist, your sharing exist, and just want to say gratitude. Um,
Mhm.
and shout out to crying.
Shout out to crying. Shout out to crying out the salt.
Just
Shout out to
cry it
crying
out.
out this. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that expression of gratitude. And I want to extend that to, yeah, just the plants and the land and the wetlands here that have nursed me through so much grief that I simply couldn't handle alone in my body. Yeah, they've just made it possible
Wow.
to live with the grief.
Yeah, I'm just thinking now, like, yeah, the land as a grief tender, the trees as a
Mm,
grief tender. I never even
mm,
thought about that,
mm,
you know?
mm.
Um, my last question to you is who and or what is giving you life right now, like in this moment of your life?
I love that question. My queer and trans community always. I Trans people, I love you so much. I love you so much. There is no world, no future without you. Yeah, my friends, my very sweet and supportive family. I'm so blessed to come from a family that believes in me and supports me, even when they don't always get what I'm doing, even when they're a little worried and concerned. Having that that support is yeah, I don't know where I would be. Um and our artist I'm reading a Kweke Mezi's memoir right now. Shout out to Kweke Mezi. Um There's somebody that talks about being an embodied spirit and has just articulated aspects of being creative. And again, that I don't know if they have 12th house placements, but to me, they're the way that they talk about embodiment, the way they talk about just like relating to being here on this plane feels very 12th house, very 8th house to me. So shout out to Kweke Mezi. And Burdock. I love Burdock
Woo
right
woo.
now. Woo! Burdock has been emotionally, spiritually, physically supporting me through trying to stabilize a lot of like hormonal imbalances, digestive challenges that I've been having. So sweet. It feels like such a wetland plant, like it's such a helpful ally in moving like toxic buildup in the body. So I love you, Burdock.
I love you too,
And
Burdock.
yeah, just like honestly, our amazing like virtual community of healers, of artists, creatives, diviners, writers, that make the virtual space so worth being in. So just shout out to all the creatives, shout out to everybody that's doing things unconventionally, that is like following their heart and their dreams. And yes, gay people and trans people, I love you. You make this world worth living in.
Word. Mm, yes, I affirm that. Um, Danny, this has been such a rich, life-giving conversation. And I just want to say thank you for meeting me at the through line. And do you have any other thoughts on your heart you want to share? Any last words?
Thank you, Simone. I feel so satiated by this conversation. I appreciate you holding the space down. And this is like my first time kind of sharing publicly about a lot of these things. And you've cultivated such a safe and grounding space. And I'm just always so excited about all the projects that you're working on. But yes, for those that want to see more of my work, stay connected, I'm on Instagram at Mercury Moves Me, and I also have a Substack and my website, mercurymuseme.com is launched in its beta stages, but feel free to check that out. I have some visual art there, and I'm hoping to publish some writing and more offerings. But yes, it's being built. So thank you for this, Simone. It's been amazing.
Yes, thank you.